Hello, you are watching Kel67 Gaming, and this is a video that I've thought about making for quite a while, but was never actually sure what the final lineup was going to be. However, recently Gaming Off the Grid did do their top 5 wrestling games, so I thought that's the kick up the arse that I need to make me really think about mine. So this is my favourite 5 wrestling games. I'm just one of those, or I was one of those kids who just grew up loving wrestling. Here in the UK on a Saturday afternoon, we had World of Sport, and it was just absolutely massive in the 80s. So we were kind of brought up on wrestling. Sometime around the mid to late 80s, however, British wrestling, as we knew it, did die a death. It was taken off TV and never really recovered. And around about the time of the early 90s, the WWF came on Sky TV. Obviously we got heavily into that. Watched that through the 90s, and watched the product evolve with the war with WCW. I've got heavily into ECW as well, and then coming into the 2000s with the rise of TNA initially, and more recently Ring of Honor, New Japan, and most recently of all Elite Wrestling. So it's fair to say I've been a fan for a while, and that's why it's so difficult to pick my favourite games. I've just gone for my favourite games. I haven't tried to lever in one from all my favourite promotions. That would just be stupid, because some of them had some horrendous games, and believe me, I played most of them. But my wrestling gaming history goes back quite some way. In those early days watching World of Sport on ITV in the 80s, my companion game was completely unlicensed on the ZX Spectrum, was Rock and Wrestle. Possibly not a lot of people know about this game, but it was absolutely magical. It was for the 8-bit micros, it was everything that you could hope for in a wrestling game and more. Unfortunately, it doesn't make my list. If you want to have a look for my favourite 5 Spectrum games that I done some time ago, it does however make that list. So that's me rambled on for quite long enough, giving you a little bit of background. I think it's time that we dive straight in. So this is my 5th favourite wrestling game.
Welcome to Wrestle War!
So growing up in the UK, I was obviously a Sega kid, as well as being a micro kid. I think we all were. But Sega just completely dominated Nintendo here in the UK, or certainly in the area that I'm in. I don't know if it was across the whole of the UK. So it was inevitable that a Sega game was going to hit the list. Just purely for nostalgia, this one is Wrestle War on the Mega Drive. It was completely unlicensed, of course, but you had very familiar looking characters. The one in particular that I think everyone remembers is Titan Morgan, who was just a carbon copy of Hulk Hogan. In fact, in the Japanese game artwork, it is actually a picture of Hulk Hogan with his Python power bandana, but they've changed the name on the portrait of him. Now you would think it would say Titan Morgan, which is the name of the character in the game, but actually, if you have a look at the Japanese artwork, it says Titan Hogan Python power. So it just shows you don't always need a license, or certainly in the past you didn't need a license to just completely rip off a wrestler's looking gimmick. And Sega done that with this one. But the game itself, for a 16-bit wrestling game, is just graphically massively impressive. The gameplay is pretty much what you expect. It's very similar to like Super WrestleMania and that sort of game. Yeah, I think that you have Super Royal Rumble as well. That kind of is more of a button basher than it is any kind of nuanced strategy goes into the gameplay. However, the beauty of the game and the graphics makes up for it, and you can forgive it a lot of its lack in depth because of that. The other thing that actually I remember being massively impressed with, and such a simple thing, and you'll have noticed it on the clip there, when you win a title match, after the match you get a belt. Do you know, it's such a simple thing, but it gives you, as a kid, a massive sense of achievement that you get the title belt. So that was my fifth favourite game. So let's move swiftly on, and I'll share with you my fourth favourite wrestling game.
ただいまより試合を開始いたします。本日のセミファイナルスペシャルシングルマッチファイト。
As I said, I grew up a Sega kid rather than a Nintendo kid. So actually, I didn't get a Nintendo 64 until quite recently. And the one that I got is a Japanese one. So that's where this choice comes from. It's actually it's a game that I found reasonably recently, certainly within the last 6 months to a year ago. I'm quite a big fan of New Japan Pro Wrestling anyway, so the roster really appeals to me. And it does have a strong roster of late 90s New Japan Pro Wrestling. You've got the all-powerful Hiroyoshi Tenzan, but you've also got the standouts from the Super Juniors. You've got Jushin Thunder Liger and you've got Tiger Mask, all with authentic music, which obviously always helps the experience. The game itself plays very similar to the Aki games, and of course the later Yuke's games, which they're still making, the WWE 2K games. The reason that I pick this one over the Aki games, which seem to be more universally loved, because I didn't grow up with these games as a kid. I've got no sentimental or nostalgic attachment to them, and when we've been playing, myself and Aiden, wrestling games, we don't have the US Aki games, but we do have one of the Japanese equivalents. We have Virtual Pro Wrestling 64, which is, I believe, WCW NWO World Tour. But when we've played it, myself and Aiden, what we've found is that this particular game, the Tukon Road Brave Spirits, is a better game for playing multiplayer because there's no cheapness to it. We recently done a generation challenge on wrestling games, and one of the games that we did play was Virtual Pro Wrestling 64. If you want to go and watch that, you'll see that it's very easy to get carried away, and I was there was a couple of times where I've grabbed Aiden without him having the chance to defend himself, and just end up throwing him into the ropes, because you don't want a multiplayer game to be the first person that gets a move in just wins because the other person simply can't do anything, which is how I found that Aki game. This one's not. This one, a lot of back and forth, and matches can drag on. It's a bit like wrestling for real. You do get some very short matches where you can knock out your opponent in double quick time, but you have some matches where you can have back and forth, and the drag on for 10-15 minutes, and it's a very enjoyable experience. So that's why this one makes the list ahead of the Aki games. So with that said, why don't we have a look at my third favourite wrestling game? I nearly didn't put this one on the list because it's another Yuke's game, but it's so vastly different to the New Japan outing, as an overall package, that I felt that it did warrant inclusion. It takes a lot of what the Tukon Road Brave Spirits game does well and improves upon it. Obviously, this is a couple of games further down the road. I loved the original SmackDown. It was, for me, as a PlayStation owner, as opposed to an N64 owner, that I found it that was the game that was truly groundbreaking. Loved every minute of it. However, the roster was very small. I think it only had 8 characters. I might be wrong about that, but it certainly wasn't very many. What this one done was it gave you a vastly expanded roster. It gave you many more match types, and what I particularly liked is the endless season mode. For those of you who haven't played the game, there are some scripted events that happen, but they happen completely at random. So the season mode doesn't have a start, a middle, and an end. It just keeps going on and on, and that's the way that I played this game mostly. You could also play multiplayer season mode, which I made a lot of use of with friends at the time, and we did play through so many years of in-game time. Our reality not quite the same as WWF or WWE reality. For a start, we never had to change the name from WWF to WWE, even though we kept going till about 2060. And unbelievably, in 2060, we still had a full-time active roster, including Triple H, The Undertaker, The Rock, and even some of the ones that just had, in real life, had fleeting appearances. We had S.A. Rios, we had Crash Holly, but I just loved every minute of it. We created our own characters, and battled each other for all the belts. It was just massive fun. This one's pure nostalgia for me. I think it's a good game, certainly for its time, but I think it's more the memories of playing that endless season mode that do it for me. So very quickly, we have ended up here, and this is my second favourite wrestling game.
Fight! You can't escape!
This is the most recent game on the list. Again, this is one that we played in our most recent Wrestling Generation Challenge. If you want to watch that, I can recommend some of the matches on there were brilliant. Always worth a watch. This is Fire Pro World, or Fire Pro Wrestling World, I should say. The Fire Pro games are, let's be fair, they're legendary now. For the way you can build a match. This is the best match engine on a video game. There's just no doubt about the way that you're limited initially to your weak grapples and strikes, and you've as the match builds, more opportunities arise for you to use bigger moves before finally hitting that big finisher, which can be kicked out of. It's just a wonderful, wonderful game, and where this game really excels is with that engine and its customization. You can create any arena you want. Well, I say arena, you can create the ring, apron, and mat. But the customization options are great for the wrestlers as well, especially when you go into the move sets and their AI, the mannerisms. If you're into this game, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And this is a game that actually there's a lot of people buy this game and don't ever play it, which I think is a sin, by the way. But the reason that they don't play it is because you can match a player, a created character's AI to the real life counterpart so closely that some people they get the game, they get all the created wrestlers, and they just watch matches happen. That has to be the ultimate compliment that you can play a game that is every bit as entertaining to watch as it is to play. And in fact, some people think it's more entertaining to watch than it is to play. It does have somewhat of a steep learning curve, but it's definitely worth sticking with because it is just a fantastic game. Graphics, you have to get over that. There's no getting away from it. This is not the prettiest game in the world. But if you can see past that, and most people can nowadays, I think when you see the popularity of indie games and retro gaming in general, I think people can get over the graphics. So anybody that hasn't tried this out already, I would certainly urge you to do so. It's a fantastic game and definitely worthy of a place in the top 5. But it isn't at the very top. Because the game at the very top is this one. This is my favourite wrestling game of all time. And we're going back to the early 90s and we're going to the arcades. This game just blew my little mind when I was a kid. As I mentioned, this was around about the time that WWF first hit big on Sky TV in the UK. I think it had been going for a couple of years before this particular game came out, because I remember playing WWF Superstars a lot previously, and as fondly as I remember WWF Superstars, this is the one that I really remember. The bigger roster, the size of the sprites on the screen, I mean, that's something that you never saw sprites that big, and for the time, of course, the graphics were absolutely mind-blowing. The game had speech on it, albeit not brilliant, but it did have speech. And most importantly for me, it had what became my favourite tag team of all time, who were never actually a tag team, but every time I played it, the Ultimate Warrior and the Earthquake. Because what this one introduced that WWF Superstars, Technos' previous game, didn't have, is the finisher moves, which was mind-blowing. And Earthquake had the best finisher, and I was an Ultimate Warrior fan as a kid. Didn't much care for Hulk Hogan, I have to say. I was one of the ones that cheered at the end of WrestleMania 6 when some of my friends were a little upset, I should have thought. This game just got me at the right time, at the right age that I was going regularly to arcades. It was just the perfect storm. And that's why it's my favourite wrestling game of all time. Now, that's my list. If you agree with me, then while I applaud your great taste, it's a little bit boring and a little bit of a cop-out, if I'm honest, because no two people's gaming history is the same. So please, in the comments below, tell me what games are your favourite, or what wrestling games are your favourites. It'd be great to read. See if there's any that I'm not familiar with. Because for all the wrestling games that I've played, I'm sure there's some that I haven't. So please get writing down below. Tell me what I should be looking out for. But that's it for this time. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Please drop a like on the video if you've liked it. Drop a dislike on if you've disliked it. If you want to share this video anywhere or with anyone, please feel free to do so. I would appreciate that greatly. And as always, the most important thing you can do for me between now and the next time I see you, which hopefully won't be very long, is to simply keep gaming.